Let's get your call this meeting to order at 6:30. My name is Sean Murphy. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem filling in for Mayor Will Karspeck tonight. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. All join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If you do roll call first.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht.
Here.
Trustee Wing.
Present.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Here.
Mayor Karspeck will be absent this evening.
All right. Moving on to citizen participation. It's for topics not on the meeting agenda and for topics that will not be considered for a public hearing. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. And please state your name and address for the record if you would like to approach the podium. Tonight it appears we have no citizen participants. Would anyone like to join? Has anything to say? Okay. We'll move forward into scheduled items. Let's start it off with consent agenda. This is routine matters that require a single vote for each item. Would anyone on the board like any of these items removed or pulled?
I would like to see you pulled.
Okay. Item C,
Yes, please.
any other items?
I'd also like to remove item F.
Item F. Would anyone like to make a motion on items A, B, D, E, and G?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Okay. so
Second.
moved. And seconded?
Yes.
Let's call a vote.
Trustee Wing.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Yes. Motion passes. All right. Trustee Wing, you have the floor on.
Yeah, we're about halfway through the year, even though this, the financials only go through April. And Chris, I don't want to put you on the spot here, and certainly don't need to go through the 33 pages. But as I went into this attachment and found that we were $11 million under budget, obviously a good thing, revenue's in good shape. I'm assuming, and not to answer the question for you, that maybe there's some really big capital items that either haven't been done or delayed, or I'm assuming this budget year to date is truly a budget year to date, so those numbers haven't hit yet. So again, I didn't want to.
That is correct. So these numbers are through April. As we talked about before, our revenues and our financial information is typically kind of 2 months behind schedule because we don't get our sales tax revenue for instance, we don't get our sales tax revenue for June until August from the state. So everything's a couple months behind. In April, we had not initiated several large capital projects. Some of those are just now kicking off, road improvement projects, sidewalk improvement projects, our big utility expenditures. We're spending money on design and right-of-way acquisition, but the actual construction of those projects won't start until a little bit later this year. At your next meeting is a good example, though. In July, you'll have a multi-million-dollar wastewater contract being presented to you. So we do have, it's just a lot of it's the timing of construction.
Yeah, the big one's $10 million was water and wastewater.
Yep.
Under budget, if you will, on expenses. So.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No problem. Great question. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions on item C? And Trustee Albrecht, if you'd like to ask your questions on item F.
Sure. And this is just to address the comprehensive plan action update. It is nice to see the kind of report card on where we're at time-wise on all those projects, going alongside our strategic planning. So thank you for putting that before us. I did want to ask, and I'm trying to find my specific question, regarding the economic development and sustainability, economic resiliency. Did we conduct a business survey to gain a deeper understanding of the needs, concerns, and ideas of business owners and employers, or is that forthcoming?
We did, at our annual business breakfast, we post surveys to all the participants. There's a QR code for people to fill out the survey online while they're there. And Walt did some informal survey work prior to him retiring, but no, we haven't done a formal large-scale survey of all the businesses in town. So we did get a lot of good survey response back through the survey prepared by the Small Business Development Center in Larimer County that we solicited at the business breakfast. We haven't done a larger survey than that.
I was just curious how that was conducted, and thank you for putting that out there to those groups. I do wonder if this would be the opportunity to suggest some tweaking to that, or if we could bring this back. There's just there are some action items I have for economic development regarding small business downtown, really surveying them, their needs, and projects they have that they need the town's support on. They're doing a lot of self-guided promotion and that type of stuff downtown, which is great, but I'd like to know how better we could come alongside them and what we should have as part of this plan. And so I don't know if we bring this back and talk about the specific item, because I have a lot of ideas, or if we want to go, push this through and then just talk about that separately, or however you would like to address that.
I think that's certainly up to y'all in terms of how we do that. We do have a new downtown business liaison, Stephanie Horvath, who's our community engagement manager. One of her new responsibilities in the last 30 days or so is to be a downtown business liaison. So we'll be embarking on a lot of coordinated communication, if I could call it that, engaging with the Downtown Business Collaborative. We already host meetings with local nonprofits in downtown. Some of that spills over to the Downtown Business Collaborative, who participated last Thursday in that meeting. But as she gets her feet under her, that's probably a great opportunity to survey specifically downtown businesses and then bring that information back to the board to discuss and hear ideas from you about what we could or should be doing differently. Yeah, so I think that's something we could definitely do this summer.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you for the update on that.
Sure thing.
That's all I have.
Appreciate that. Do I hear a motion on item C and F for approval?
Second.
It's been moved by trustee Ayers and seconded by trustee Wayne. We do a roll call?
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Wayne,
Yes.
trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Yes. Motion passes. Moving on to our next agenda item, the introduction of our 2024 I-codes. And let's see if we've got Jonathan Gessick presenting.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy and
Yeah.
members of the Town Board of Trustees. This is John Giesick, and he is our building official. He shares that role with Jose Gonzalez, who is also here. And then I just wanted to introduce 2 of the 3 building permit technicians that the town has. They are town staff. We have Taylor Desch, who's been here about 18 months. And then we have Audrey Bothan, who's been in here about maybe 15 months, and she is part-time. But they wanted to come and learn about these proposed changes so that they can better understand. And then they also hold meetings with the building community. We call it a B4, a Berthoud Builder Breakfast Burrito meeting. We do that 3 times a year. And so they will be presenting this information along with John in August. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you.
Yeah, they do a lot of work. And we appreciate them on that. building
We
department
appreciate
side.
having you guys here. Thank you.
Well, Honorable Mayor, Board of Trustees, and town staff, thanks for your time tonight. Today, I just want to introduce our next code adoption, which is dealing with the twenty twenty-four I codes,
You can speak up as well.
which deals with the twenty twenty-four I codes. And a couple other codes that the state is now mandating for us to adopt, so. Just a quick overview, updating all building codes to the twenty twenty-four edition. Electrical code stays at the twenty twenty-three edition as state mandated. New codes are added, including the Wildland Urban Interface Code, or the WUI code, and Colorado Model Electrical Code. We're gonna go over a quick cost analysis, just a very high level, provided for the residential building and energy codes. In your package, you should have received a list of the most significant residential code changes, just for some review. And then also, we have been meeting with contractors. We had a meeting with the contractors back on April 8th. And we're planning to meet with them again on August 5th to go over these changes, get feedback, see what their take is on it as well. So here's a list of the building codes that we're looking at adopting and updating. The IBC, or the building code, residential code, energy, plumbing, mechanical, fuel, gas. The property maintenance code, swimming pool, spa code. And then the two new codes from the state requirements are the Wildland Urban Interface Code and the Model Electric Ready Solar Code. So kind of an introduction into the Wildland Urban Interface Code. This was brought through a Senate bill 166. It established a wildfire resiliency code board in the Division of Fire Prevention and Control to help enhance community safety and resiliency from wildfires through the adoption of these codes and standards. The state of Colorado requires that all jurisdictions adopt it. The state has created a map to identify properties that will be required to meet the code requirements. So as you can see on this next slide, we have a little bit of a map. And on the slide after this, it goes into, it's a little bit bigger map, so maybe we can see a little better, but there's a few parcels. If this map is adopted as is, this is a map from the state that they have provided that classifies hazard areas and where this code would apply. So you have the orange and you have the yellow. The yellow is a low hazard. And the orange and red, which is typically up in the mountains, is gonna be a high hazard. And depending on what hazard you fall into are gonna be different requirements. So here's a map, so you can see at the north and the south, and then a little bit on the east, there's a handful of parcels that could be affected by this code if the map stays the way it is. Kind of an overview, really high-level touch base of what this code's trying to do is trying to create a zone and protect houses from wildfires, whether it be a brush fire. We don't have the mountainous zones like they do up in the mountains, but tall grasses, bushes, stuff like that, the state's looking at too as a wildfire area. And so one of the requirements would be signage and addressing, making sure that the fire department can easily find and access the address. Building walls and fences out of non-combustible materials would be an important one. And then also creating a buffer zone 5 feet away from the house where you don't have any vegetation or any combustibles that can catch on fire. Zone number 2 is between 5 and 30 feet. Kind of gives you a little bit more leeway. You can have a couple of indigenous trees in there. And then 30 to 100 feet is a little bit more trees than that. So the other part of this code, besides the site, is on structures. You're limited to the materials that you can build. You have to build with non-fire. You have to be able to fire-resistant materials. So your siding, your roof classification, your deck, stuff like that would have to be built out of fire-resistant materials. The electric ready and solar ready codes is the next state mandated codes. This code prepares new homes and buildings for electrical vehicles, rooftop solar, and high efficiency electrical appliances. Cities and counties that have building codes must adopt the 2021 IECC along with the model electrical code. That's the energy code. along with the model electric code and the solar ready code when adopting or updating any building code between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2026. So currently, the town has adopted EV ready and solar ready provisions in the code currently. So really what this would be adding is the electrification readiness for homes and commercial buildings so that they can easily be transferred over from a gas fuel firing furnace to an electric furnace or electric appliance. This next slide's a chart, kind of shows you where this applies. So residential, commercial, there's different requirements for commercial less than 10,000 square feet and then additional requirements for commercial over 10,000 square feet. So we primarily deal with residential. We do get some commercial, but the solar ready is required, EV ready is required, and the electric ready is required on the residential. And then as we get into commercial, they have to supply a certain amount of EV charging stations per parking spaces. Similar to what we are requiring now, we just want to match up with what the state's going to be requiring for that. What this means for the residential and for the commercial for getting it ready to be electric ready is install electrical wiring or raceways to provide the ability to allow the replacement of combustible appliances. They must provide adequate adequate panel space, label all the installed wiring and raceways. And then we're estimating on the residential side that the cost associated with this change is between $500 to $1,000 for this code. So next is the residential cost analysis. So we obtained the data from the Home Innovations Research Labs. This is based on moving from the 2021 IRC to the 2024 IRC. That's the International Residential Code.
Thank you.
Majority of changes are optional for builders. So in the next couple slides, you're not going to really see a lot of code references because they may not affect the costs unless they choose them. And actually the cost for the 2024 IRC code adoption is decreased, which is really good news for us. Part of this being is the town of Berthoud adopted the 21 back in 2022, and that was a big hit. Jumping from the 2018 to the 21 codes, there was a lot of increases in cost, a lot of extra insulation and energy code adjustments. And now by doing that, you're actually saving on adopting the 24, which is a good deal. So on this code analysis, they referenced two model homes. Home 3 and 4, I highlighted 3, but it's actually 3 and 4. And this kind of gives you the rough ideas of the home. It's 2,600 square feet, 2-car garage, 3 bedrooms, basement. Based on those reference houses, 3 of the code changes affect the majority of these homes. The first one is going to add a requirement for framing and an open floor edge to support guardrail assemblies. Most builders are doing this already, but this makes it a requirement. Back in 2021, they upped the mill for a vapor barrier under a slab to 10 mil, and now the code has reduced it back down, so that's a cost saving there, down to 6 mil. And then the third one, depending on if the builder installs stucco, it modifies the water resistive barrier for the stucco requirements in dry climates, so they can use a paper as opposed to a synthetic with this modification. So what this lets us know is looking at decreased cost of anywhere between $316 to $2,227 based on the modeling that they've done. On the residential energy code cost analysis, same. We have a model home here that they're using as a reference house. Data was obtained from the Home Innovations Research Lab. It's based on moving from the 21 to the 24. This is based on the prescriptive method out of the energy code, and the reference home is a 2,400 square feet, 2-story, 4-bedroom home. And again, we're seeing some significant decreases in costs Mainly due to there was a big change in the attic insulation and slab insulation requirements for these homes. They actually cut that back, and also in the 2024, there's a section in our 408 that allows you to have a lot more flexibility when complying with the energy code. So you can pick and choose different areas that you can make more cost effective, and still meet the energy code. And that's basically the overview of the code. Another couple of items that aren't in here are going to be fire sprinklers that I was hoping to get some feedback from you guys tonight. And then also the water conservatory code, water conservation code, and seeing if you guys had any thoughts on that. I know that there was some mention of that maybe it was of interest. And then any questions you might have, and kind of go from there. Also, just the cost analysis should be in your paperwork. That kind of goes through the entire cost analysis. This is just what we felt was important to share, and as well as the residential energy code changes. So.
All right, thank you. Questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple quick questions.
Trustee Wayne?
A slide back, it mentions a guard assembly. What, can you tell me what that is? One more back, right there, under the R10. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so basically if you have like a second story kind of a balcony area that looks over a living room,
Okay,
then they'd have to install a guardrail right there to keep people from falling over right down into the living room.
isn't it code already that there's a rail,
Oh, yeah.
like a catwalk?
Yeah, so what this does, this code actually makes them reinforce those posts that hold up the guardrail
Okay,
and actually have a code behind that versus now they just have to meet a minimum of 150 pounds.
okay,
But this
Okay.
actually gives them a code requirement.
thank you. Second question, I have just two slides back. It's got the gas, one more. Wait, go back one. One more. It's the one that showed, I don't see it now. It's the one that, right there.
Okay.
So, like HVAC, electric, HVAC's gas, and the electric is twice as much?
Yeah, this is showing you if you chose gas appliances versus electric appliances and then what the cost savings on the energy code would be.
Okay, so the cost savings is more on,
Yeah.
perfect, I had it reversed, thanks a lot.
Yep. Yeah, no problem.
Other questions? Yes, I did have one or two. Going back to 6 mil versus 10 mil, what was kind of the reasoning? Was it just price related?
No, I don't think they found the advantage of going to a 10 mil.
Okay,
So there was no real benefit for doing it. So they just brought it back to the 6 mil, which was standard in the industry for many years.
and then diving into kind of implementation of SB 23-166. What's kind of the mindset behind implementing that in Berthoud? Is this going to be some sort of zoning overlay that we're going to have?
So we're talking through the requirements and what the process is supposed to look like. A lot of this it's driven by the fire departments and the fire prevention, but we probably are thinking that it's going to mostly fall on the building department to enforce this. For a couple of different reasons. It's going to be dealing with building permits, so they're going to have to come through us. Our biggest challenge is going to be identifying these lots and where they're at to be able to say, okay, here we have a case where they need to meet the WUI code. And also we've talked about having it deal with planning on larger developments. And then if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Murphy, what we would do is if the town adopts this WUI code, which we get to do, we would have maps available for the public, for the building community, for the development community. We would, if it is a new development coming through town that hasn't had any lots created, we would be working with that developer to identify which portions of the property may be covered by that overlay. And again, we'll adopt a map. When we adopt that code, we'll make sure that that map is available, that we're communicating clearly through the development review process. And then this would also be covered at a B4. And we just want to make sure that we're communicating clearly with everybody what this does or does not mean for them.
Okay.
One
And
note,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, one note is that this map is a draft. And that the town does have the option of submitting a revision to the map to get the map changed. So when this map was created, it was, there wasn't the urban development that there is today. So some of these zones may be able to be taken out of this map, but we would have to do a study on it and then create the map revision, submit it to the state. So.
And then the last question I had, there were some items talking about geotechnical reports and some of the code. I didn't get a chance to dive into it, but I'd like to hear more if you had read into those sections. Particularly on utilizing backfill in certain environments. I don't know if you had.
Jose, are you familiar with
I know
that?
it's deep.
Sorry, Jose Gonzalez, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, I didn't get a chance to dive into it, but there were some revisions on utilizing like USDA geotechnical information for kind of identifying soils that would work with backfill or not. I was wondering if you had done any research into those areas on the updated code or not.
We haven't really touched on the geotechnical aspect,
Okay.
and I think the main reason being is we require soils and engineering reports for all foundations that are being installed.
Mhm.
But we can definitely look into that code, and unless you know off the top of your head.
I've had dealt with that soil classification before they're referring this new change. We haven't dig into it yet.
Okay.
One thing to consider is if the soil classification changes once you go 10, 12 feet
Mhm.
below grade. So those are the items to consider in adapting the code as written with that change.
I think it's just an area worthy of attention. We've had that brought up on a number of our developments, particularly in the north end of town, on just the quality of soil that we're building on. So I think if you guys could take some additional care in evaluating those sections, I think that would be appreciated. I don't know if the rest of the board agrees with what I've seen. That's
We
my
absolutely-
experience.
Absolutely agree with you on that. So we've seen the issues and the problems that have arisen out of certain developments in the area.
Hmm.
And, yeah, we will definitely get some good research on that and get back to you with the process on it.
Any other questions?
So, you had mentioned water conservation, but we didn't see anything. Would you just, what was your point on that?
My point on that was I was thinking about it on the way over because Ann had mentioned it in a meeting about a month or two ago that the board might be interested in looking at a conservation code. And so I didn't want to ignore it and see if that was something that you wanted or were interested in getting more information on, or if we just leave it as is. So just some direction on that.
My comment would be, everything's water. I mean, we have just such water issues. I would think that would be actually a priority. I would think that, people may be grandfathered in to some degree, but I would think going forward, it would be something we should take a serious look at.
All right.
Before we dive into comments, I'd like to open this item up to the public if possible. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this agenda item? Okay. Well, I will definitely bring it back to the board. Did you have any additional comments on that, Trustee Wayne?
No. No, I was just.
Or
yeah.
above and beyond?
No, I was just, since you commented on it, then I
Oh.
didn't see anything on it. I just wondered what was the water conservation about, so.
Yeah, definitely something that we feel is important, and wanna
Yeah.
make sure we brought it up at least.
How does
at
the rest of
meeting.
the board feel?
I would be supportive.
So we'll take a dive into that and get you back some information on the energy or on the conservation code. On the fire sprinkler system code, so a lot of the jurisdictions in the surrounding area, what we're looking at is requiring fire sprinklers for townhomes and duplexes. It is a requirement in the IRC for all single-family duplexes and townhomes to be sprinklered, but it's typically amended out as a standard. So we kind of like to looking for your feedback and your thoughts on that as far as sprinkler systems.
Someone wants to comment now on something like that? Yeah, I just, if I'm not mistaken, I lived in California. It was mandatory sprinkler systems in our house. It is very cost prohibitive, and as we keep talking and talking and talking about affordable housing, single family house, and I think now, if you get rural, it's coded in, isn't it? If you have a house over a certain square footage and you're in the mountains or something, I think you have to have a sprinkler system in your house. But I'm just saying, for in town where we have fire departments and fire hydrants close by, it is extremely pricey to have an in-house sprinkler system put in. That's the only comment I would make on that.
I tend to have the same hesitancy with putting a sprinkler system in any kind of metal housing.
I would recommend that we have conversations with the fire chief.
Mhm.
I'm sure he would lean towards certain areas being sprinkled and not just based on history and their
Yeah.
experiences with our particular wildland urban interface. And I know that their jurisdiction goes into county, and so it's beyond the town of Berthoud, but I think they're gonna have a better, I think that map looked kind of old too, that we looked at. So it'd be nice to have that updated based on our fire chief and our fire marshal and their perspective on of that WUI area, because there's a lot of housing jammed up right against it, and especially in Colorado, some of those big fires we've seen right in those areas. It'd be nice to know that Berthoud has stringent wildland urban interface codes adopted into those areas now before it's all built out, instead of wishing we had done it later. So to me, that's really critical and important.
Very good. We have met with the fire department on a couple of meetings with the WUI code. Also Carrie Dan with Loveland Fire and Rescue. She's on the board and she works with the town of Berthoud, so we got some good resources there, so we can nail down anything that you guys want to see. I totally agree with you on the fire sprinkler systems. A lot of it is pushed by fire departments. They want to see them for sure. But we always leave it up to the town board. In the town to, it's what you guys want. So.
I guess I'd be interested in hearing fire districts' opinion on that.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful, because I think, yeah, if you hear the stories and how it maybe changes that dynamic for when they respond to a fire in that area, how different, I know a sprinkled house, there's more chance of survival than a significant higher chance of survival if you have a situation like that. So it would be nice to maybe hear from the fire chief on what their experience is.
So we have the geotechnical, the water conservation, a little bit more information on the WUI with the fire department, and then the fire department's comments on the fire sprinkler systems.
I think that nicely sums it up. Any additional comments?
Thanks.
Thank you, very appreciated.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. All right. With that, we'll move on to item number 3, the Harvest West amended resolution regarding annexation petition and resetting public hearing. We have Director Johnson presenting on that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Murphy, and members of the Town Board of Trustees. The original date to hear this agenda item was set for June 24th, and the majority of you all will be gone for CML. So there will be a special meeting on July 29th. We have to redo the petition, because once you hear the petition, you have to set the hearing date no shorter than 30 days and no greater than 60 days from the date that you hear the petition. There is no new information being provided to you tonight, other than we just need a new hearing date because of quorum. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Questions? Comments? Do I hear a motion on that?
Sure.
I'll move to postpone the meeting until when?
July 29th.
July 29th.
Or just move to approve the resolution as written.
I'll accept that one. I move to approve the resolution as written.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, trustee Ayers made the motion and trustee Hardy seconded it. Can we get a roll call vote on that?
Trustee Wing,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, trustees.
And we'll just keep you up there. Moving on to item number 4, the intergovernmental agreement between the town of Berthoud, Colorado and the town of Meade, Colorado. And again, Director Johnson, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Murphy. So, and members of the Town Board of Trustees, this is an intergovernmental agreement. It really is a boundary agreement between the towns of Meade and the town of Berthoud. Town staff has been working collaboratively with Meade for 2 years in developing this. You can see our urban growth boundary is on this slide. This is the town of Meade's urban growth boundary. So the notch on the south side, you can see that little funky notch. It matches their little funky notch that comes up north. And then you can see our boundaries, how they're knit together, and they are perfectly aligned. So we determined that it would just be a good idea to, while our communities are growing and the whole region is growing, is to avoid future conflicts, future possibilities of developers pitting one community against another community, and just agreeing that development north of a line will be in Berthoud, development south of the line will go to Meade, and then we are agreeing to collaborate to improve Weld County Road 40, and a commitment to improve and go in on grants for Weld County Road 7 as well, and that there will be no storage facilities within 1/4 mile of that, their northern line and our southern line, just because it does impact then the aesthetic of the overall area. And other than that, it's a pretty simple agreement, and that is the content.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I have a question.
Trustee Wing.
Could we put your map back up for a second? Is that's not the total area of Meade, right? They go farther, or is it?
Correct, this is the urban growth
Great.
boundary for Meade.
Great,
This is just a blow up so you can see where our lines interface.
thank you. And then the area straight, if you could go to the other map, the area straight east of us, is that already somebody's?
Yes, so that's already that's in the town of Meade's urban growth boundary
Okay.
area. And then you can see where our urban growth boundary is kind of that mustardy yellow color.
Right. So Meade wraps around that right now, or will?
No, Meade does not wrap around it to the east. They
Okay,
just don't go,
Johnstown's
go north.
growth management area is right at the
It-
eastern boundary
that's
of
my
Turion.
question.
Is that what you were asking?
Yep.
Yeah.
thank you. I got it. So is that neighborhood, is that Johnstown now?
No, it's actually unincorporated Weld County, I believe.
Okay,
But there is a golf course community being developed around that is in the town of Johnstown.
Right. okay, thank you.
Any additional questions from the board?
I was just
Oh,
curious.
Trustee Albrecht.
I was just curious about why just the storage unit comment came up. What specifically about that was,
it was a request from the town of Meade. And we said that we didn't have a problem with it, so that we would oblige their request. And it is based on the aesthetics and what their future land use proposals are for that area, not necessarily compatible with outdoor storage, non-commercial junkyards, things of that nature aren't compatible with what their plans are. So they wanted to make sure that we would not allow something like that. And then likewise, we did the converse, that we don't want anything within 1/4 mile of our area as well, because we want to plan. And those uses tend to have a negative impact on the properties around them.
Thank you for clarifying. Seems like an easy ask.
Any additional questions? All right, again, I'd like to open this up to the public. If you'd like to approach the podium. Anyone? All right. I'll bring it back to Gord then. Do we have any additional comments on this item?
Yeah.
Trustee Peters?
Thank you guys for putting this together. That looks, the cooperation between the regions of the map look really nice. You sort of have that transitions all working really well and not into a weird, block of one kind of land use versus the other, so that's really good. What, besides don't mess with the border, is there any other sort of specific connections for future development possibilities being discussed between the towns, especially out towards the corridor where I guess I'm envisioning making sure that if that I-25 corridor is built up together, it looks like they're melded together as opposed to, Mead, then 500 yards of nothing, and then Berthoud. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and I understand your concern. So one of the items that is in the intergovernmental agreement is also a statement that when they amend their comprehensive plan or when they have proposed development, that we are a referral agency and that we will participate with them. They have reached out already, and Keith Knoll is going to be participating in their trails master planning efforts as well to make sure that there's connections there. In our old intergovernmental agreement, which did expire, there was thought about having some uniform design standards within a certain area. I felt it was more important, rather than negotiating another year on uniform design standards, let's just get the line in the sand done first, and then those additional conversations can happen afterwards once we agree on these basic principles.
One more.
Go ahead.
Do we have any intergovernmental agreement to our north, County Road 60?
We do have one with Johnstown. It is an older one. And we are going to be working with the community development director, and I already have set up a time where we're gonna meet and we're gonna start talking about that border as well.
And it's hard without the map, but as you go a little more west along 60, Johnstown, do they come that far west with their growth management area?
Not all that way west, however, then that's that Campion, that unincorporated
Okay.
development area in unincorporated Larimer County. And then Loveland would be something that we'd want to work with next, if Loveland even comes down that far. So I
But
haven't.
today we don't have one.
No,
Okay.
not with Loveland.
Okay, thank you.
And we are working on a updated coordinated planning agreement with Larimer County, though, isn't that right? We're
Yes,
at
we-
least attempting to initiate that process with them.
Yes, so we, the town has, through TON, we got the latest copy of the Larimer County IGA about 18 months ago. We Berthoudized that IGA, sent it back to the county, and we're just waiting for the county to put it on their priority list. But we've done all the work to get it there, and now we're just waiting for them.
Since we're on the subject, and we don't think the probability of us going much farther west for our management area is in the cards, like,
I don't think so, and Administrator Kirk can maybe explain that there was an ordinance with an annexation limitation further west, maybe?
2016, there was I believe it was 2016, there was a ballot initiative that was passed by Berthoud voters that requires, the language is very limited, and it's caused some issues in the past, but it basically says that prior to the board considering any annexation west of County Road 19, it has to go before the voters. The voters don't approve the annexation, it's more of like, correct, it's more of an advisory vote. But for all intents and purposes, it creates a bit of a hard line in the sand as you head west at County Road 19. So there would have to be some pretty strong justification and a really strong desire from a developer to go through that process. And outside of some areas immediately adjacent to Heron Lakes that actually did go to a vote and passed overwhelmingly for the Marina Club, that hasn't been tested. You may recall, not to belabor the point, but you may recall that a few years ago, there was an effort to annex the Welch Reservoir owned by the Handy Ditch Company. That was west of County Road 19. That got placed on the ballot, and then the ditch company effectively changed their mind. So the vote happened, but we never received the results because we officially took it from the ballot. So no idea if that would have passed or not, but that was the only other vote that's happened since that ballot initiative passed.
Any additional comments? Do I hear a motion on the resolution?
I move to approve resolution 2025-11. Resolution of the Town Board of Trustees approving the urban growth boundary agreement between the Town of Berthoud and the Town of Meade.
That's second.
All right. The motion was made by trustee Hardy and seconded by trustee Wing. We get a roll call vote.
Trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
trustee Wing,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Yes. All right, the motion passes. We'll move into item agenda 5, our final item for tonight. Updates on our housing diversity plan. And Director Johnson, you have the floor again.
All right, thank you very much. So just like anytime we get a master plan, planners like to plan. We like to know what we're going to do. We have that roadmap. We know what the vision is, and we just go. So just mainly for the audience, and as a reminder, 2022, the state voters passed the State Affordable Housing Fund. In 2023, the town signed on to Proposition 123, which states we are going to increase our supply of housing diversity or diverse housing by 3% every year for the next 3 years. We had a very low benchmark. The state was having, all the communities in the state were having problems meeting the higher benchmark. So then they gave us a new calculator that was provided to you all a couple meetings ago, and we have already nearly doubled our affordable housing product with that new calculator. So we're good. And then in 2024, because we signed on, or late 23, because we signed on to Proposition 123, the town was awarded about $100,000 to do a housing diversity plan, which we initiated in 24. We got a lot of public engagement. Everybody was excited to share their opinions. And then we had the steering committee, which 2 of the trustees were part of that steering committee. An action plan was developed, and then in Q1 of this year, that action plan was presented to you all. Because we signed on to Proposition 123, because we have this housing diversity plan, we were then also afforded another grant to start implementing some of the action items in that housing diversity plan, which is to create process flow diagrams for both existing processes as well as any streamlined processes, to develop a guidebook for if we would ever have a multifamily development, that they could go through this expedited development review process. And so we got that grant, and then as well as in the grant, we will be receiving funding for a third-party consultant to help us find money to fund land and water banking. So that's where we are today with already implementing some of our quick wins, but I wanted to show these items to you. So the quick wins in the action plan are expedited development review process, those site plans for multifamily, should anything ever come to Berthoud. We got a grant. We will be wrapping that up in the next 9 months. Land and water banking funding review to try to identify where we might be able to get funding. We got a grant to help us with that. Housing products and diversity review, that will be an update in your land use code that you will see this fall. and trustee Murphy or Mayor Pro Tem Murphy have provided us with some input, and we are working with a third-party architect to try to balance requirements as well as still hold the development community accountable for providing us with good quality and a good diversity. And then a housing consortium, just reviewing what's going to work for Berthoud. Staff has initiated that with a few members of the community that work in the nonprofit realm for housing. And then reviewing ordinance 847, which you're gonna see on the next slide. So staff has already working on these quick wins that came out of the Housing Diversity Plan about 2 months ago now, and we received a grant in order to do that, to help support staff and timing. Then the long-term goals then would be, of course, to secure funding for land and water banking, to continue to continuously improve and review our land development code to make sure it is meeting the standards. And again, that whole process of continuous improvement. We do have the land development code open right now, and we'll talk to you about that a little bit more on the 29th of July as well. However, we don't like to continually open. It just creates management issues with Muni code. It's just not consistent for the development community by continually changing. So we want to open it one big time and then keep it closed for a while. And then just continue to form strategic partnerships with in the development community, getting nonprofits, getting the for-profit sectors together and seeing how there can be some synergies. So staff promised and made a commitment that we would do the quick wins in a year. And we're almost gonna be done 3 months ahead of schedule. And then the long-term goals really are those long-term goals, securing funding, just continuously improving our land development code and our process, and then continue to form those strategic partnerships. So while we've initiated and we will get some of the quick wins done this year, of course, we just don't get it done and then call it a day. We have to then continuously improve upon what we're doing. So one of the items was taking a look at ordinance 847. And I believe a copy of that ordinance is in your packet. What we have on the screen, on the slide, shows what we were able to find in our repository, in our history, of how many homes we have provided incentives to. And they've all been to Habitat for Humanity, because ordinance 847 is for nonprofit organizations, not for-profit builders to give them funding. But these are nonprofit organizations, and their target audience is for those individuals that are income qualified for their product. Now, right now we offer up to two a year where we would waive specific fees. So in the table at the bottom, you can see there's a column with 2, 5, 10, 15, and 20. And then you can see a line item that if the town waives fees inclusive of the water that's required for, $25,000, that the total would be $90,000. Or if we take that water out and we only waive $20,000 a building permit, then that's a $40,000 commitment. And then Safe Built waives about $10,000 of the permit fees. So right now, if we are inclusive of the water, we are waiving $100,000 a year. And that includes Safe Built. Safe Built. So then if we were to up that waiver to 5, and then 10, 15, and 20, you can see what that cumulative impact is. And John Giesek, who was here from Safe Built, has indicated that they will make a commitment to work with the town dependent upon which level you choose to waive every year. So they will continue to work with the town, and they believe in nonprofit agencies that do provide a housing product. So they're willing to do that for nonprofit, not for for-profit organizations. And that's why staff is recommending that ordinance 847 stay for nonprofit organizations that are specifically attuned to housing. Safe Built will follow through on that. There are lots of different tools that can be used by for-profit builders and developers to incentivize keeping their prices low. And that is something that we'll be looking at, but ordinance 847 staff really does recommend that that just stay for nonprofit organizations. And that concludes staff's presentation.
All right. Thank you. Questions from the board?
Just a point of clarification, so with the ordinance 847, you're saying we would not amend it other than if we were to adopt adding the amount of houses we approve per year?
Correct. Trustee Albrecht, the only thing we are wanting to amend is the number. And we wanted you all to see what that financial obligation and commitment is from the town for those numbers. And that's the only thing we're asking or suggesting that you amend is just the number. And if you choose to amend for a number, then we'll bring that ordinance back to you in a separate hearing. You're not amending that tonight. I wanted to show you that fiscal impact and not assume you want to do something.
And does the staff have a recommendation on where best is to land, how we can absorb that impact?
So when you get up there, it's a big impact, and it's a little scary for staff to think about, making that kind of recommendation. I think that we have a nonprofit partner in the audience tonight, and I think it might be good to hear from them what their plans and forecasting are, because maybe it's raising it to 5 or 10 and then seeing how that goes, knowing that if Habitat for Humanity got on a roll and we're able to do 20 a year, then maybe with your recommendation, we could come back and ask for more. But in the beginning, I've not spoken to Administrator Kirk at all to know where this would come out of the budget. However, it would be a budget recommendation then you would all see for 2026. But right now, I would recommend, I'm really conservative fiscally, I would say 10. But I do want you to hear from a development partner in town so you know what their plans are as well. And then definitely want you to talk to Administrator Kirk about the budget.
Absolutely, thank you.
And if I could, I'll just chime in briefly and then happy to answer any questions that you have, and also love to hear from Habitat. But for context, in 2020, we did just over 500 single-family building permits, and in 2021, we did just over 500 single-family building permits. In 22 and 23, those numbers were 222 and 220. So, in the context of our total building permit fees and the total impact fees that are collected, on average, we budget 250. And that is only, I don't mean to dive too much into the weeds about how we forecast revenue, but we budget based on single-family equivalents. So even if we budgeted 250, we only had 220, we actually might have collected more revenue because we had other commercial development or multifamily projects, townhomes, other things that may not get counted, quote unquote, as a single family, but we budget as a single family equivalent. So 250 single family equivalents is a pretty average number for us for the last 8 years. And so if the number was 5, excuse me, we're talking about a very small fraction of the total revenue collected from building. And the thing about building fees and impact fees are they're intended to both support the activities of the community development department, but then also to build new amenities to offset the impacts of growth. In the grand scheme of things, a handful, as an example, if the park fee is a little more than $3,000, 5 permits is $15,000 in the context of, multi-million-dollar park projects. So just, I don't mean to downplay, these are big numbers. In the context of all of the building that occurs, it's a small percentage, if that makes sense. The one caveat being our raw water dedication, which is a big number. And as you can see, it's a significant, it's basically half of the total fees collected. So that's a tough one to waive. But I think water banking would also help with that in the future. If we have a solid water banking system, they won't need to be paying for raw water dedication because we'll have water bank that can be applied to that development.
Any additional questions? All right. Thank you, Director. I'll open it up to the audience if anyone would like to speak to this item. You may approach again. Typically, we allow 3 minutes. If you could state your name and address, we appreciate it.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and trustees. My name is Tiffany Brody. I am the Berthoud Habitat for Humanity Executive Director, and my husband and I reside at 2734 South Wind Road. So first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of amending Ordinance 847. As a nonprofit, the support by way of fee waivers is what helps make what we do possible. As you know, labor and material costs have been on the rise, right? We've experienced that for several years now, and it's not slowing down. Each and every dollar that we receive, whether it's a fee waiver, a cash donation, a gift in kind donation by way of a good or service, directly impacts our ability because those contributions offset our construction costs, resulting in our ability to be able to build more homes in alignment with our mission and in support of addressing the housing crisis here in our community. So historically, as you know, we've been around since 2000, and we've built on average 1 to 1.5 a year. So to put that into perspective, this current fiscal year, 24-25, or July to June, will close on 2 homes that we've built. This next year, 25-26, we're slated for 5. The next year, 26-27, also at 5, maybe more, depending on how I'm able to run the organization efficiently and develop partnerships and garner more support for us financially. So to put that into perspective, I'm gonna have to speed this up a little bit because I just recalled I have 3 minutes. But I want you to understand the average cost that it takes for us to build a home. And this is average, ranging from a 1-bed, 1-bath to a 3-bed, 2-bath. So that amount, construction cost, is $331,546. So to ensure that we remain financially secure and stable so that we can keep doing what we're doing in this community, collaboration and partnerships and support of this ordinance is truly critically essential. So to further explain, and this is where it gets a little technical, and I'm happy to meet with any of you individually, but I want you to know that when we qualify a homeowner, what we do is we go through a calculation process to determine their max affordable principal loan amount, okay? It is consistent with and capped at 30% of the homeowner's gross monthly income, amortized over 30 years, that we extend at 0% interest. So there is a gap between the construction cost and the amount that the homeowner is paying. And so that gap amount is the difference between the appraised value and the amount that the homeowner is able to pay based on their qualification at time of sale. So we carry a silent second mortgage in order to cover that gap, which is forgiven after that 30-year period. So for example, we are going to be closing on a home July 15th, and I want you all to come see it soon. I'm talking to Administrator Kirk about this. It is a 1-bed, 1-bath. This homeowner is at the 51% AMI. So if they make up to the 80% that we serve, obviously we're recouping more of that cost back, okay? So the sale price will be based on the appraised value, which is anticipated at $385,000. The max affordable monthly house payment for this individual at 30% of their gross monthly income is $1,030.12 monthly. They pay a down payment of $2,500, so the first mortgage equates to $250,543. So then we're holding that silent second equal to $131,957. So in essence, if you take the construction cost less the first mortgage, we're just holding that difference, $81,000. And that's one example. So it varies across the board. But I hope that that depicts how critical the support is. And I hope you know by now that I really endeavor, as does our board and our staff, to build capacity in order to meet these needs even more so than we have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the audience? All right. I'll bring it back to the board for comment. Trustee Wing?
I have a question, so I don't know if you need to come back up or not, but I just want to make sure I understand this right, if I heard what you said. So essentially, based on the gross income of the individual or the family, you have the payment at 30% of that, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you refer to it as a silent second. What that sounds like to me is you're subsidizing the rest of the loan, and my question is, how are you doing that for 30 years? Do you set up an endowment for each individual to make sure that you can support them making their mortgage payments for 30 years? Or how are you financially doing
No, there's
that?
financial risk involved for each house that we build.
For 30 years potentially?
Potentially, yes.
So you're looking at a potential income stream to support these houses for decades?
Yes. And we do consider their monthly mortgage payment as revenue because we serve as the lender as well.
So
that
So
brings
are
in-
you on the note? Are you on the note with the buyer, with the bank?
We have a promissory note, just like any other loan.
And so the bank, whoever you're using, feels confident that you are good for the amount of the difference going into decades out till the loan's paid off.
Yes, and that really just ties to the budget. And so it's a parallel effort, right, to make sure that we're building responsibly and also increasing our revenue.
And I'm just curious, is there any kind of auditing vehicle that audits your financial situation to ensure that repayment going forward?
Yes,
Is that a legitimate question?
it is, absolutely. So
Okay.
we do have our financials audited, and there are guidelines that we follow to ensure or do our best to remain as solvent as we can. So for instance, we may sell some of our mortgages to a First Bank or independent financial so that we can then recoup a large, say 90% of that mortgage loan amount that we can use to reinvest into the community.
If you were to become hypothetically insolvent, could you put that person at risk who's in that house?
Could we put the person at risk for their loan? No, they still have the home and it's home ownership, it's deeded. If we were to not be solvent and we would have to fold, what we would do is likely merge with another local affiliate that would absorb and maintain the structure of the Habitat model.
Okay,
Yeah, does that answer your question?
it does.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Additional comments on this item?
Comments?
Trustee Ayers?
Yeah, comments. I mean, I think that we all push to go through this process, and I think there's need, obviously, and I think if we're going to continue with this process and try to hold people to the fire to make sure that we're providing product that is affordable and attainable, then we have to do our part in whatever ways we can as well.
I have a question. Would we be able to put in the ordinance like a stair step? Like we say 5 now, and then 2-3 years we say 7, and 2-3 years we say 10? Or would we have to like decide one number now and then come back to it later? Or is that putting too much on future boards? Or is my question understandable?
I'd maybe turn it over to Administrator Kirk on what you believe, but
That's a great question. It seems to me that you could write the ordinance to have a graduated implementation schedule. So you could say in 2026, it's 5, and in 2027, it's 7, and in 2028, it's 10.
Or a
And from
cap.
there, and then from there forward, it's 10, unless otherwise changeable. I think you can do that.
I'm sorry, I had a follow-up question now I should have asked earlier. Whichever number we're talking about, those are up to, right? So if we cleared 20, but we only needed 5, then
That's
we
correct.
only need 5.
Yeah.
I should have asked that first, sorry.
And actually, the way the ordinance works today is that they still come and submit a request to the town board. The ordinance allows you to waive the fees for those. So those requests come annually to the town board. You approve their fee waivers.
so it's amending the quantity of requests that can come before you by a nonprofit organization. And then every individual request, like Administrator Kirk mentioned, you will evaluate that on a case-by-case basis.
If I could maybe comment on this. I initially proposed 20 as kind of a way out there goal for us. Obviously, you can see the cost that would incur on the town if we fully expected 20 and covered 20. I honestly believe we could do less. I like the idea of not having to come back and revise that number. I'm very comfortable with remaining with the language we currently have, where they have to approach us and we look at it on a year-by-year basis. But I'm flexible on this one. I do believe this is kind of our nonprofit ordinance, and it should remain that way. But I think we should be bold in this goal. I believe that our local nonprofits have set a really good example for how affordable housing can be built. And by kicking in our small percentage of the total cost of these homes, I think keeping it within the control of future boards is important. But also it's important for us to step up in this capacity.
Now, this ordinance doesn't guarantee approval, right? We still have the ability to say, well, you know, our budget this year is kind of,
That's the reason why
Taking
they
a
would
hit.
need to come before you. Yeah.
we can say, well, we're not gonna pass it, even though we've said we do up to 20.
Yep.
We can, so I'm kind of like now back to, rather than grade 80, we just go for the big number and leave it up to future boards to say, yeah, our budget's gonna take a hit, and you can't do it this year, we can only do 5 this year.
Sure. I have another question now. Are there any, competing is probably the wrong word, but are there any other competing
Nonprofit.
programs, nonprofits in town or in the area that you would foresee in the future eating into any of these permits? Which would be another reason to go higher, so that they're not sort of, they wouldn't be fighting over. however-
There'd be enough for everybody.
Mhm.
Yeah, so right now, the only other nonprofit housing organization that's in the area that I'm aware of, and we can definitely ask Ms. Brody to come back up, would be Loveland Housing Authority, and they service a very different population than what is being served by Habitat for Humanity. And I don't know if we have the necessary social service supports in the town of Berthoud to make Berthoud an attractive community for Loveland Housing Authority.
I don't know if it's out of scope, but I think the Veterans is sponsoring a neighborhood in Longmont of tiny homes. So I don't know if that's a whole different animal, but
That is through the Veterans Community Health Project, is that what it's called? I think that's Veterans Community Project, VCP. Yeah, and they worked with actually the same, or not exactly the same developer, but same individuals, different development teams on a project there in Loveland as Legacy Park here in town. So there are unique opportunities like that that could be brought forward in the future. We don't have any currently operating, but yes, there are others like that in the area that could bring forth, veteran housing or affordable senior housing. I think Catholic Charities has some apartments in Loveland that are new. So I think there are some other entities operating around us, but none other than Habitat for Humanity operating in Berthoud today.
Trustee Ayers, were you done with your question? I think one other thing to take into consideration is, there's a difference between waiving and a true cost. It's not like we're giving the money out, we just aren't taking the money in. I think it's a little, needs to be taken into consideration, that nuance.
I think something to consider too, that I feel strongly about, is that we're not trying to create a community, or at least it's not my desire that we create a community where we're trying to attract people who have this need into our community, but instead to meet the existing need of our community. And one of the, I thought about the veteran housing, if there were veterans in need in the community, I would wanna know how we can meet that need. I think there's not as much of a demand right now for homeless veterans, but if there were, I'd like to know that this model we'd be able to implement this with developers to have veteran housing or senior housing like you brought up. And so that's important to me, that we're looking at and going to the people who are active in the community and saying, what is the need and how do we come alongside that, instead of creating a community that people are going to come to for the housing, because I don't think that's the goal. I think it's to take care of, use our taxpayers' dollars to take care of our taxpayers, essentially. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And my concern with that too is some of the language about developers putting in a certain amount, and I know this is all state stuff, requiring a certain amount of attainable housing. Is our goal still needs to be Berthoud residents and helping our Berthoud people. And so with the figures for adding, the permits per year waivers, I appreciate the conservative view that Ann shared of increasing it to 10 just for efficiency's sake. I think if we see that the need is gonna be here within the next year or two to have that addressed, then let's just give them the kind of leeway to say we're ready to keep moving forward. I also wanna be, responsible with those funds, because $1 million lost to the town if we go up to 20 is not insignificant. So I do want to be really mindful of what we're trading that for. So it's definitely a juggling act. So I would say somewhere down the middle would probably be helpful to these guys. And kudos to Habitat for the rapid increase in availability of homes. That was a huge shift from 1 to 5, in a couple of years. What an amazing feat that must have been for you guys. So thank you so much for stepping up and going to work. You guys must be busy trying to find funding. And so if there's additional stuff we can be doing on our side to help, this is definitely the time to let us know. Thank you so much.
One other plug, I don't know, that row of houses, is that on Third? Fourth? And I'll tell you, I drive by there regularly, just, you can tell the ownership they're taking and the pride they're taking in their homes. I mean, it's a very nice little strip right there, and they've added things on, so it's nice to see.
I guess if I could just add to this, I really look at this modification as, really, when are we going to have any kind of nonprofits approach the board again to up this number? If we want that to be sooner and we want to go with 10, I think that's a reasonable accommodation for this. So, I
Take care of us
guess-
for a few years, I mean.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. So if 10 is a more suitable number, I'm open to that as well.
You're 12.
Do we have any kind of consensus on a number? Are we all in agreement that we should move forward with moving up the number?
What were those numbers again, Tiffany? You were projecting? I
5 and
didn't-
5.
5 and 5.
For sure this coming fiscal year, the 26, 27, currently 5, but that just depends on, who knows, if we're blessed tomorrow, that could increase sooner than I anticipate.
Okay. So it'll take you a little while to hit 10 possibly. I think 10 would be a fair number.
Trustee Wayne?
I'm fine with 20, but I would go with the consensus on 10. Again, it's not a cost, but I understand how we're looking at it.
Is there any other comments on this or questions?
There was one part of the update that I just wanted to address, just for clarification. It was under, sorry, my system is slow. The short-term goals, bullet points, there was the paragraph, I'm just gonna read it real quick, because I just would like clarification. Amend development code standards to increase the number of housing products required to meet diversity standards based on aesthetic discussions held with the trustees on December 3rd, 2024. I recall the discussion, but I just want clarification on, we're increasing the number of housing products required to meet diversity standards. And is that the 50% that, is that relating to that 50% that to go through the expedited process, or is this a different comment?
It's a very different comment. Right now, for developments, let's say that, and I don't have the code sections completely memorized, but let's say if you have a development on 30 acres, you are required to have 2 distinct housing models. So that could be a side-loaded garage, it could be a front-loaded garage, it could be paired homes, for example. What we're wanting to do is we're wanting to increase the types of housing, adding in courtyard homes that you all saw on the virtual tours and what we've been discussing, adding the single track driveway back to a recessed garage. We're wanting to add more types of housing that we want to encourage into our diversity standards. So it's not the it's not the fast track process for site plan for multifamily. The housing diversity is, what do we want our neighborhoods to look like?
And so to further clarify, what this is saying is to implement code that would increase from 2 product types to more than 2 per
Right,
development. And that's across the board for all developments coming online.
exactly. So that we're increasing the amount of architectural diversity and aesthetics into every neighborhood, regardless of what the neighborhood is.
And I guess the thing I appreciate the intention of that, like truly, but the thing I continue to struggle with, that requirement that we have of diversity, is I feel like the development that comes before us, I think they give us, you know, the best product they can present. However, I think it's losing its aesthetic appeal because they're having to add so many different types of diverse housing, and they're trying to just make more money. And so it tends to lose, I think Berthoud loses because the end product tends to look more cluttered to me. Whereas if we had a developer that was strictly just going to bring affordable housing and that was their focus, and they were beautifying it, making it beautiful, like Habitat houses or bullet houses or the veteran housing, that would be one product type. So it would automatically not meet our code if there was one person who was intentional about a product like that. And I think the developers who are bringing the majority of plans I've seen, their intention is to not bring that type of product. They're just doing it because they have to. And I think it's creating dysfunctional neighborhoods. And this is just my personal beef, and I continue to struggle with this, as if we're adding another layer to that diversity requirements to developers, I'm really concerned about that looking not pleasing to Berthoud. And so I personally can't support that element while everything else is incredible. That part of it, I definitely am against for Berthoud's code. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I think what you need to evaluate is the unintended consequence of not requiring diversity, and what you will end up with are cookie cutter houses one after another, and they're exactly the same. So if we don't have diversity, then just take some time and maybe drive around other communities and take a look at what it is you like, and because if we take away that housing diversity requirement, we're going to have everything is going to look the same. So is that something that the town trustees want to have in Berthoud? Because that will, in my personal and professional opinion, that will be what the result will be, is everything will be the same then.
Can I comment on that? Because to me, I view this as two different things. We have the developer, the development of the whole thing, and then they have to diversify for a different housing product. To me, that's the builder. So the builder would be the nonprofit, not the developer.
This has nothing to do with ordinance 847.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, so,
Just trying to
so we
figure
are
out the
talking,
diversity
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, no, we're talking about the diversity standards. Right now in our code, we require different housing types to be mixed together. So in one neighborhood, we could have alley loaded, we could have paired homes. So something like Prairie Star, what we're seeing there, something like is being proposed in Legacy, where you might have a cluster of townhomes in a sub-neighborhood. Then you'd have another area that has larger homes on quarter-acre lots. And that's in a very different area. In Legacy, that's towards the bottom. There's some floodplain, there's some open space, and they're able to work with that and create a sub-neighborhood. Then you have the townhome area, then you have other homes that are on smaller lots. So they're actually, by doing that diversity, it's actually getting back to historic patterns of development and historic patterns of how neighborhoods built out. Because you're gonna have a big house on a big corner lot, and then you're going to also see some smaller homes in Berthoud. So it actually replicates some historic growth and development patterns by having a required mix of diversity.
And I do think, it's an interesting policy question that I think really is driven by the town board's preferences. And so, prior town boards wanted to see a mixture of housing types and housing diversity. And, Prairie Star is probably the best example of that. And actually, they did a lot of that prior to our code requiring diversity. They thought that was a unique opportunity to create townhomes. The Mission homes are in Prairie Star. Those cottages are a nice little product. There are larger lots up in the northeast corner. And so, they mixed a whole variety of development types. Legacy Park will be similar based on their approved neighborhood master
Rutland
plan.
Farms is gonna really incorporate that, I got.
Yeah, that's the Legacy Park
Hey, it's
project.
gonna be, oh, it is?
Mhm.
That's gonna be an exciting project.
And so, I think, but again, I think a lot of that is, those are preferences of the town board. And I think what you're saying does make sense. You get, and I think it, admittedly, some of it's subjective, right? I mean, it's, you're getting a mix of housing types and you're not creating, it can either feel like you're not creating cohesive neighborhoods or it can feel like you're creating monotonous neighborhoods. And so, I think, again, a lot of it's a policy choice driven by the town board's preferences.
Well, I think the thing that I'm struggling with the most is, yes, perhaps a development like Legacy Park, you would need that because of the scale. You would need diversity. But if you have a smaller parcel, like we've seen at like one of our agricultural spaces that was getting developed, they were cramming a lot of product on a small footprint when you could have had like 5 estates and it would have maintained its agricultural charm. But our code prohibits that, so we wouldn't even entertain that.
So actually our code doesn't prohibit it. It depends on the nature of the zoning. And so if it is zoned suburban residential, it would require a mixture of lot types. If it's zoned rural residential or agricultural, it would require larger lots. Or some kind of, our conservation zoning district, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but in any case, we have a conservation zoning district that allows for more open space. It does densify a portion of the development, it leaves a larger amount of open space around it. So some of it is a zoning choice by the town board, and some of it then is code driven in that, if you're gonna develop 100 acres, you have a minimum number of housing types. If you're only gonna develop 20, you wouldn't have to provide a whole host of housing types. You could just do that in a single housing, type.
And to play devil's advocate, based on, I think I know what project you're talking about, the code requires minimum lot sizes, right? So if a development wants to not have the largest number of properties in a development and have lot sizes bigger than that, they may do that but the requirements of diversity are still there, right? So if there's 100 acres and they want to put, I don't know, 500, these are random numbers, right? If there's 100 acres and they want to put 500 homes, and they can, they're going to, but the diversity requirements are based on how many homes they build, right? So if they want to, if there's 100 acres and they only want to put 100 homes on there, they still have to fit a half and half of product type, or if they want to put 500 homes, they still have to fit half and half product type, correct?
It's
No.
it's
I know those
based on,
numbers are off.
yeah, it's based on acreage, so right now, there's 2 diversity types if you have 20 acres, 3 diversity types if you have 30 acres, 4 if you have 40, and it kind of goes up from there, but I think we're capped at 4 different diversity types, or maybe it's 5 different diversity
think so.
types.
So I think where I'm going with this is, hypothetically, let's say that a developer is gonna develop 40 acres. And they're gonna put 4 10-acre homes on there. Those have to be 4 different product types. Each of those properties has to have, because it's 40 acres with 4 product types, if they only build 4 products, they have to all 4 be different.
I don't believe that's actually how the code is written, but I think we do need to go back. This is a good conversation, because I think a lot of what happens, we can run some test cases, kind of what you're describing, that kind of what-if scenario. But I can say, like, the one project in particular, on the south side of town, they actually are including a lot less lots than they could under our code, in order to maintain a kind of a specific feel. Now, it may not be the feel we want there, but they could actually jam a whole lot more stuff onto that lot, depending on if they got the zoning they asked for, and based on their plans. And so there is no maximum lot size, I don't believe, in our code. And so, if you wanted to do, if one of your housing types was detached single-family residential, and you wanted to do all of them on 1/4 to half-acre lots, you can do that. There's no requirement that says you're capped at 6,000 square feet or anything. And in some cases, developments have included larger estate lots. And we also don't have, so it's not a 50-50 split. So if it's, you have to include a variety of housing types, and you'll see soon in a different project that'll be brought to you in the next couple of months, that the vast majority of the lots are detached single-family homes, actually on larger lots, like 1/4 acre, which is funny to me that that's an estate lot today, but whatever, that's, life has changed. And they have just a few lots to meet the kind of minimum standard of the diversity requirement. And those can be done like as a paired home that just looks like a large house on a big lot. And so that still meets the code requirement, and that's effectively what they'll be proposing. So there are creative ways to create kind of cohesive aesthetic neighborhoods. And the other reality is, I would say, when I first started here 7.5 years ago, every single developer said, I have no interest in smaller lot development. I don't want to build cottage homes. I don't want to build townhomes. I can't get anybody to build them. They always gave us the song and dance. You have to let me just build detached single-family homes on an 8,000 square foot lot. And now it's the other way around in a lot of cases, because of median home prices, because of interest rates and challenges in selling detached single-family homes. There are a lot of builders who are actively trying to build smaller product townhomes, because that's what's selling, because that's what the market needs. So it's been an interesting change in a lot of ways.
What in that case, if someone wanted to just build cottages, they couldn't?
Again, it depends on the size, but I don't know that as a community, like if it was a 100-acre project, I don't know, we'd want 100 acres of cottage homes. I mean, and that's, again, I think it's a policy decision for the town board, but maybe we don't want, I think to have 100 acres of just cottage homes would be a challenge. And so maybe our diversity numbers, maybe they could be more flexible based on the size of the project. Maybe for smaller, developments of 20 or 30 acres, maybe we do say, hey, you just have to do one housing type. But I think we think about the context of 100 acres, if they did come in and say, all I want to do is build cottage homes on 3,000 square foot lots, that would be incredibly dense. And so requiring them to build other kinds of products is a good idea in that case, I think. But I do think running some test cases and being able to say, okay, if this, then what? might be helpful to kind of see what could be done under our code and what our code really does require versus, what often gets proposed, because that's generally, I think, what the market supports. So maybe that's something we could work with one of our planning firms to just run a couple of, like, we'll run our own master plans on a couple of lots in town to say, look, you could take this 100-acre square under our code and do this, this, or this. So you kind of see the variety of what could be done. And that might also give you some context about like, okay, well, this one actually feels right to us. And so maybe this is how we want to strengthen our code to kind of push the development this way rather than this way. Does that make sense?
Sure, and would it be more beneficial for us to really just look at the zoning? Again, the zoning map as a board and say, we would like to have some like opportunities for this to have a more dense product and this to not have a dense product. We want to make sure that the code allows for those things to happen in those places where it makes sense.
I do think in the context of zoning is how you create place types, right? I mean, the zoning district that gets approved creates a system of land uses and development patterns that should create, suburban residential is a good example, right? The kinds of infrastructure, the types of development, the types of land uses, the setbacks, the road cross section, all the stuff that kind of gets associated with zoning should create something that feels like a suburban residential neighborhood. And so you can very much impact the look and feel of a community by zoning. That's what zoning is, frankly, that's exactly what zoning's for. And so if there are areas of town where you feel like, hey, this is not the kind of development we want here, then those are definitely zoning choices.
I don't wanna belabor it. So if you guys have any more thoughts.
Do we have any other additional comments on that item? Is that clear enough, Director, that having some scenarios would be helpful?
We'll do some scenarios, maybe we'll even look at some aerials so you can see that. And then just a quick reminder, so that Housing Diversity Plan Action Plan, those are things that you all adopted. When you adopted the Housing Diversity Plan, those were presented, that was the direction that staff had. So if you're wanting to unwind something, then we have to go back and unwind. So
I'm pretty sure I had the same position last time, and so if it's just me.
That's fair.
I still feel like we're requiring too much, and it shouldn't be every single development, because I've seen every development that's come before me since I've been on the board has been the same, in the sense that they've had the same map out of different diversity, and I struggle with how it plays out. So that's just me, and I
No, and I would agree with that, like seeing a visual of how the actual code plays out, I think it's really helpful not only for the board, but for citizens in general.
And I think we could do that with the existing neighborhoods we have too. We have a neighborhood like Heritage Ridge that only has 2 different housing types in it. Townhomes and detached single family on kind of standard suburban lot. And then we've got developments like Prairie Star that have 6 different housing types. And so it's a very diverse neighborhood from a development standpoint. So we can use our existing neighborhoods to kind of give you that aerial flavor, and then also kind of take a development and say, this is what the code might allow or require today. That would be probably a helpful exercise.
That's a good point. Do you have any on file currently that are kind of presenting their plans for diversity?
we do have, yep. So we can pull things that are not coming to you.
That would be,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep, and then I'm really sorry. One other thing that I forgot to do at the beginning, I did want to remind you, Ton Hillenbrand, the planning manager, and then we also have Bella Monzo, and this is her 4th week. Manzo? Yes. Manzo, and she's joining us. She is a Colorado girl, but she was living in San Francisco for a while and came back to Colorado, and she's joining us as a planner. She has private sector planning experience as well as project management experience. And Bella and Ton will be, they're here tonight because they wanted to hear your input, because they will be helping write code. They'll be helping implement what you all decide. So just wanted, that's the last thing I'll say, maybe.
It's nice to meet you.
Welcome back, and yeah, thank you for coming. And on the other item, was there a consensus around moving forward with 10 as the modification? Is that enough?
We'll bring that back to you as an ordinance, and you guys can make a formal decision, but that sounds good. And don't think of it as a small amount, think of it as a 400% increase,
Yeah.
so that's good.
Thank you. All right. Well, that concludes our regular business. Moving item reports. Trustee Hardy? Yeah. Trustee Ayers?
Yeah, so last week the port did their yearly tour of the different parks and open space around town. And the focus of the tour was specifically the new purchases, and we got a good look at the growing river corridor that the town is in control of now. And I can say, going all the way over to the Shaw Farm and looking back west across the farmland and the river corridor to the mountains was pretty spectacular. And if we can continue and get those connected up and have some nice open space and trails, that's going to be a huge boon, I think, for the environs of the town and for the people who can take part in it. It was really good. The only other thing I had was there was a citizen participation from the meeting, and I gave the gentleman some advice, and I wanted to run it through staff to make sure I gave the correct advice. He's having an issue with the Heritage Ridge Metro District and some trails, and he was concerned that he and some other residents don't feel like the trail is being kept up to the quality that it should be. And I told him that he needs to go back to the actual documents as to what the requirements for that trail would be before he moves forward in any direction. Has he contacted you? Okay.
And I don't think he's contacted me. I think he's talking about the soft surface trail on the east side of the project. It is not owned by the town, it is owned by the Metro District.
Right.
All their other trails are all concrete, they're all in great shape. We were actually just out there last week, looking at a few of them, but that soft surface trail, I will say, at the time it was built, the town did not have a trail standard for a soft surface trail that it did not own. And it was built in a way that we would not support today, and we've changed our trail standards as a result. So it's probably tough to maintain, but it is a Metro District owned facility and they are responsible for maintaining it.
Okay. That was the advice I gave him, was that it's because the town doesn't own it, so if he has issues and wants to pursue it, he needs to discuss that with the Metro District Board.
Yeah. Okay. Our official regional trail follows Fifth Street down to its terminus and then across. So it's kind of it's a soft surface add-on. It is part of it's a public trail, but it's not really part of the town's trail system, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Birthday was fun. I didn't spend a whole lot of time, but I got some food, listened to some music, and watched some old-timey baseball, which is always fun for me. So yeah, it was nice seeing some of you guys there. Good time. It was really crowded. It was nice. Crowded in a good way. Well peopled, I guess.
Well attended.
Well attended is the English word that
Trustee Albright?
Birthday was great. My kids and I were talking about how there were, between Johnstown Days and Taste of Fort Collins, I wonder if that impacted the attendance, making it less than it could have been. But I did chat with our sergeant, and it sounded like it went off without a hitch as far as incidents, and so that was a huge celebration. Great job. It was amazing to have their presence in the park, and that was fabulous. And I have to say, like, I was happily surprised by how it worked out. And then the really awesome part was when it got hot, everyone went and cooled off in the water feature, which was a unique thing we've never had before. So that was pretty great. I think as Berthoud grows, I did have a solution in mind, and this is something I brought up before about one day when we take over Mountain Avenue from CDOT, it'd be neat if Berthoud Day was, several blocks, city blocks that could go from Town Park to Fickle Park. That way we utilize Fickle Park and have some implements there. And then if those streets are closed, people really wander downtown. So that was my, midnight revelation of like, well, we could have it at Town Park, but maybe we just stretch across mountain. So that was a great event. So thank you guys for everything everyone did for that. And then what was the other thing I was gonna bring up? Oh, had we scheduled a meeting I know we talked about discussing our committees and their roles and the addition of new committees, like a senior advisory committee.
We have not scheduled that as a board agenda item yet.
If we could get that scheduled, I think that would be good. I still would really love the seniors to have, someone reached out to me from the rec center saying that they also field a lot of senior comments and would really love somewhere to send them to have that channel to speak to us directly, and I think that'd be awesome. That's it.
Trustee Wing.
Yeah, maybe I've got the bar really low because of comparing it to LA, but I thought the Birthday Days was amazing. I thought the town did a killer job. I thought it was great. I've probably been in town less than most of you, and I hear your passion for small town Berthoud. And I just thought the day was oozing patriotism and Americana and the tractors and the people and everybody getting along. And it just felt like, for those of you that are old enough that, back in the 60s, it was just a cool feeling. So kudos going all around for that. I just thought it was a great day. In the Berthoud Weekly Survey a while back, there was an article about BRAC.
Mhm.
How's BRAC doing?
Pretty good.
Everybody know what BRAC is? So BRAC is Berthoud Report a Concern. And it's something that the town started up to get feedback. And I just had never heard anything about it except reading this article. So I thought I'd see how it's coming along.
So we push it. We've actually had BRAC for a while now. It's something that I believe Nathan, our GIS analyst, the GIS coordinator, built that we could take feedback. It tracks where we get feedback, concerns, or sometimes kudos, but mostly concerns. And it allows us to track the follow-up and response. So we want it to be more heavily used, so that's why we're doing some public outreach and trying to get information out via our social media
Once a
sites.
quarter or so,
newspaper.
could you maybe bring a
Sure.
recap to this and just say, hey, of the 100 feedback we got, here was the top 5 or top 10?
Absolutely.
It'd be great. I think it's good for us to hear what's the flavor out there.
There's some fun ones too that I
Yeah.
think give you a laugh, so yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yep.
All right, speaking of the Berthoud Weekly Surveyor, if you didn't see it, Becky, the editor and owner, it sounds like is really struggling. And when you talk about Berthoud Days and small town and all that, I personally think that newspaper plays an incredible role in our community, talking about the sports, a weekly athlete, what we do. Right? I mean, our meetings are all in there and recapped. And I sent an email to Chris and just saying, she's not in financial trouble. She's just got some personal things going on where she cannot run the paper much longer. And I just wonder, if there's something we can do as a town, interview somebody in college who's, majoring in journalism or something. I don't know. But I just think if we lose that paper, I think it says something about our town. And it's actually a real concern of mine because I think it's really important. And I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or feelings or where you guys are at on that.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm very discouraged. I mean, they're definitely ready to retire. Like, this has been their labor of love for 20 years. I think this was their 20th year. And having written for the Surveyor and learning about journalism through them, I feel like passionate that they continue. And my husband and I have thought about taking it over actually, but it's
Wow.
not. I don't know that that's in the cards for me. It's a lot to take over. And so I'm concerned about what will happen. And especially with their archives, because those are historical documents. And so if there's a way financially for the Historical Society or the town to archive what they have to preserve it, I think that would be something the town probably could do, is help preserve those for future generations, because though, that's 20 years of Berthoud's history. You know, that's going to be gone if it goes with them.
Well, 20 years of history, but they talk about stuff from 100 years ago, and 100, they have pictures,
Right,
they have
right.
pictures that are over 100 years
Yeah,
old,
Mark
regularly.
Ryan's articles were all
Yeah.
the Berthoud bulletin stories. So those are all in there.
So I don't want to discount anybody, but can staff, I mean, one of your subject expert intellectuals, you know, kick this around and see if there's anything the town can do to help salvage this? I don't know, I have no idea what that looks like. I just think if it stops going, we lose something.
Because of what we do, we keep the media at arm's length. Not in a negative way, but like, we don't want them telling us what to do, and they sure as heck don't want us
Sure.
telling them what to do. And, you know, it's that kind of fifth branch of government, right?
The third rail.
Yeah, the free press is so important, and so, but, you know, obviously it plays a major role in our community. I think from an archiving standpoint, we have a contract with the Historical Society. We pay them to do a variety of historical related activities, and so that's something, if they were open to that and the board was open to amending our contract with the Historical Society, that seems like a slam dunk, to make sure that those get archived regardless of what happens with the newspaper. And then, you know, we can certainly talk about it. We do have contacts with other, you know, media outlets and
Okay.
firms, and so maybe we could just say, hey,
Yeah.
you may not be aware that this is an opportunity, and look at it kind of from a business development standpoint, and then stay out of it. But I think that's.
And I think that's what
probably-
makes Bertha different, right? We help the VFW out, right, with the place. We got some of these other things we're doing that you don't hear about necessarily big towns getting involved in, and we have a little more of that personal touch on things like that. So if you could at least put it on the radar and maybe come back to us and just say,
Editor of the Loveland Reporter Herald once years ago before COVID, and they were actually, they owned the rights to the Berthoud Reporter, or not the Berthoud Bulletin, is what they have, which used to be the paper before the Surveyor. And they were thinking about bringing back a section of that, but then that was before COVID, and I think that all fell apart again, because your offices are right here in Berthoud now. So,
I mean, there's thousands of newspapers local that have gone out of business across the country. This one's making money, so I don't know if the Daily Camera's even around, but, you know, if they would wanna hook onto a piece of, I don't know. I just, when I read the article, it kind of hit a nerve that I think it'd be a big loss.
Makes
I think
sense.
I think we do have to be careful, just because you don't want government to be influencing the press,
Mhm.
right? If that's perceived on any level, then it would seem skewed.
go from memory.
And so,
Yeah.
well, I'm saying the same heart that this is integral to Berthoud's.
But if staff, the town has some contacts with other towns, I think, yeah, any networking, whatever. Anyhow, I just wanted to bring it up, 'cause I thought it was kind of important. Something that's sticking in my craw a little bit, I don't know why I looked at it a couple days ago, but I did. And I looked at all the municipalities that are getting water from Chimney Hollow, the Broomfield Superiors, Louisville, Lafayette, Loveland, Greeley, and we're not. And I think about the millions of dollars we're spending on various things, and I would maybe just like to have our in-house subject water expert maybe come before us one more time and tell us why we don't need that water. And at this point, is there anything we can do to get involved in? I don't know,
I can give you a 1-minute summary, and
Okay.
happy to bring Ken in to go into more detail if it's helpful. So when the Windy Gap firming project, Chimney Hollow Reservoir, was initially conceived of, the town of Berthoud, for whatever reason at the time, and as you may know, that project was decades in the making, didn't have any interest in the project. And so we do own, and we will get water out of that reservoir. We own 10 Windy Gap units, and what we don't have is storage rights. So we will get a significant amount of water through the Chimney Hollow Reservoir. We've been actively purchasing that over the last 5 years. We are trying to buy those storage rights, but storage is highly valuable and nobody's willing to let go of it yet. So we've had conversations with other agencies who think they may have some excess storage, and nobody wanted to sell any until the reservoir was built and kind of see where things lie. So Ken is in communication with a number of different entities.
I think Broomfield may have more than
may
everyone
have
else
some Chimney
combined.
Hollow storage, yeah.
They have a
there are some
huge interest in it.
Big entities that have a lot
So,
of
so
storage.
when I see all these municipalities listed, that's because they have storage rights, but you
Correct.
say we will be able to, actually, we have rights to pull?
Our
out of
water,
it?
and a lot of it will depend on how Northern chooses to route water, because they'll manage the distribution of that water, but we will likely get water from Chimney Hollow into Carter Lake and into our system. But so the water that goes into Chimney Hollow is part of the Windy Gap project.
Right.
And we own 10 units of Windy Gap. And we will likely acquire more in the future if we can develop our own firming storage, or if we can buy additional firming capacity or storage capacity at Chimney Hollow. Most of the units, I actually think all of the units that we've bought came from Platte River Power Authority. They sold the water, but they wouldn't sell the storage rights. We've continued to have conversations with them, and they know that we're highly interested. They had kind of equivalent storage capacity for the water that they owned because they bought it, a long time ago. But storage is highly valuable, and so nobody's really quite ready to give up that storage yet. But I think we will be able to buy some capacity in Chimney Hollow.
So
at some point.
semantics, I don't really care if we have storage rights, if we have access to the water. What's the big difference between whatever it's called and storage rights?
And this might be worth a deeper dive, but so Windy Gap is not a firm water supply in that it is not guaranteed every year. So because of the way the reservoirs work on the western slope, you may or may not get Windy Gap from the western slope to the eastern slope, depending on
Windy Gap
water
feeds Lake Granby, right? And then it all comes from Lake Granby to us.
No, so Windy Gap's actually downstream of Granby, and then it pumps back. So you got Granby up here, it flows down towards the little Windy Gap reservoir, and then it gets pumped back. And I honestly, I'll butcher this because I know just enough. It's like learning Mandarin Chinese. I know just enough to order at McDonald's. But Windy Gap water is not available every year. And so if you don't have firming capacity, and there's only 2 legal places to store Windy Gap, I believe I'm right about this, and what's called first use Windy Gap. So I don't mean to dive way into the weeds here, but first use Windy Gap is prior to it going through our treatment plant, right? There's only 2 places you can store it, Chimney Hollow and actually Dry Creek Reservoir that's partially owned by Little Thompson Water District. We've had conversations with them about possible storage in Dry Creek Reservoir. You can only store it in those 2 locations. After we use it, we can actually take it back out of the river downstream and reuse it as many times as we want until it's gone. And we can store that anywhere that we can legally store it. So we have a water court application that the board approved for storage rights in the Milliken Reservoir Complex down on the South Platte River. So when Windy Gap first use water, we typically take it in the wintertime. When it goes through our water system in the wintertime, 95% plus or minus of that water goes back to the treatment plant, right? Because it's all getting used inside, nobody's watering lawns. Then we can take 95% of our first use Windy Gap water that gets discharged into the river, and we can capture, store, and then reuse that 95%. Then you could do that over and over again. Each time it gets a little less, right? Because depending on when you use it, it may be less than 95%. But if we capture that, store it in Milliken, and then pump it back to town, then we can reuse it over and over again. So the reuse potential of Windy Gap is actually even more valuable than storing the first use, in my opinion. But the first use is still important because there are years where Windy Gap may not pump at all. And so we don't count it. When we present to you our raw water master plan update and our current water portfolio, when we look at the total number of SFEs available to new development, we don't count Windy Gap water, even though we own a significant amount of it, because there's not a guarantee that it'll be available every single year yet. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, in all the time I've been here, we've got Windy Gap water every single year I've been here. So it is a very reliable supply. It's just not a guaranteed supply. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just a quick question. You don't need to go into detail, but I thought Windy Gap, and I must have the name wrong, there's a reservoir that's northwest of Granby Lake that was built not too long ago. I thought it was Windy Gap, but it must be a different That's okay. I'll ask you offline.
Yeah, and actually Northern does a really great job. If you go to their website, they have maps and kind of explanations about how the whole Windy Gap system works. That probably explains it better than I tried to, but.
Okay. Last thing I have is we're going through all this branding work, and I don't know how old our seal or logo is, but I really like it. And I would say, leave it alone, hands off. I think it's a great seal, the branding. I think it says a lot about Berthoud, so my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. I'd just like to thank everyone for Berthoud Day. I thought it was a phenomenal event. Seeing everyone at Town Park was great. I think it worked out well, so thanks to staff, Larimer County Sheriffs, the chamber, everyone involved. I thought it shook out really well. And then, while we're on the subject of Chimney Hollow, I was surprised you guys didn't bring up the findings of uranium.
Naturally
If
occurring.
that, so it might be worthwhile to see how that shakes out with Northern Water before we make any serious moves, but, yeah, that's all I have for tonight.
If I could tag on to one of the things you said about the Berthoud Days.
Yeah.
I saw Tim go by with his Monopoly hat on and his jacket. I thought he looked great. But I was thinking next year, have the trustees behind him in a car or two. We'll get a poster and just be part of the whole thing if anybody's up for it. So May and I were talking
Get
about
his
it.
little golf cart pulling a tree.
So you can wear a Superman cape.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we'll talk about that a couple months out from the parade next year.
Administrator Kurt?
Just a handful of things. A reminder that next Monday, there is intended to be a joint meeting with the Tree Advisory Committee and the Port Committee. So if you haven't responded to that and you do plan to attend, let me know. That will be an opportunity to review the Arboretum. I think we only have 1 or 2 Port Committee members that are planning to be there. They have seen the Arboretum a lot, so maybe they're less concerned about it.
6:30.
They didn't have a lot of, I'm sorry, to interrupt,
Oh,
they
yeah.
didn't have a lot of comments
Okay.
on the last iteration that was presented, I think, 2 meetings ago.
Yeah.
So,
So that's probably why. So we won't have, I don't think we'll have a lot of Port Committee representation. It is 6:30 here at Town Hall on Monday, June 16th. And then from a meeting standpoint, a reminder, we will not have a meeting on June 24th, which would be our normal regular meeting date. One of the things that, excuse me, came up as a result of the study session that we had with RAFT was the possibility of creating a small task force and consider long-term transportation issues. I was gonna bring it up tonight because I wanted to see if there were 1 or 2 trustees that were interested in participating in that task force. I know that Mayor Karspek is not here and this is a passion of his. And so if you guys want to consider having a couple of trustees nominated to work on that, really more of kind of a steering committee to work together with RAFT on maybe a longer term vision of the future of transit in our community. I'd certainly love to do that. The sooner we can, the better. I think a lot of our short-term changes or solutions are gonna have very little impact that most people will see, and in a lot of ways may create some challenges initially, but I think that there's still some opportunity to look at the long-term transit future, and a small task force is probably the best way to do that. So I'll leave that up to you if you guys want to talk about that tonight, or we could talk about that at our next meeting on the 8th. I'll leave that for Metro District and a pool that exists in that subdivision. That Mayor Karspek and I met with, I don't know how many people were on that call, but I'd say it was probably 25. They organized it. We joined in one evening, answered a lot of questions. The long and short of it is that the pool that exists in Prairie Star currently is not owned by the Metro District, and it was not built by the Metro District. It was built as part of the Westview Apartments project. It was allowed to be used by Prairie Star residents if they paid a membership fee. I understand from from some of the residents in the subdivision that pool will not be operated this year, and so they're not offering memberships because they're not operating the pool. There's a lot of talk about what the town approved or promised, and I was clear with them our call, and I'll be clear with you tonight, the town never approved a pool as part of that metro district. And it was never a requirement or an approval as part of their PUD. The final development plans that were approved by the town in 2014 and in 2023, I think was the last, none of the FDP approvals, the final development plan approvals ever included a community pool. So, there was a lot of talk about, well, the town or the developer made promises to our community. I don't believe that's exactly the case now. I don't know what, realtors were telling folks when they were buying homes, and sometimes realtors give the best picture and or maybe they give a picture they don't really quite understand, but that certainly wasn't anything the town did or approved. And so I thought we made that clear to them that night. There was some talk about a development agreement that would allow for credit of landscape water dedication if they put a pool in instead, but the district and the developer didn't put a pool in. And so I don't believe that water credit was granted. I haven't found that back in our records, but it's possible it could have been, but I don't believe that it was. And so, I think the long and short of that is that the metro district doesn't own a pool and didn't build a pool. The town doesn't own or operate that pool in Prairie Star. It was built for a portion of that development. I don't think the town wants to own that pool. It's too small to be of significant value to the greater community. And it is, I think there was some talk that maybe the developer that owns the pool would sell it to the metro district, but the district doesn't have the funds to buy it. But I'm not sure what the town's role should be there or not, other than as that development finishes out, my suspicion is that pool it will be opened again. The Westview project hasn't finished, and some of that is because of some legal issues going on between developers that we had nothing to do with. I think when that project finishes, that's still gonna be a nice amenity for that, the Westview part of Prairie Star. And maybe there's an opportunity there with the Metro District, but I just wanted to give you that update. I'll respond again to the resident that sent the email to everyone. And I'll
Do they have
copy
another
them.
phase coming along? I thought she mentioned that in that email.
There is a fifth filing. Is it fifth filing or sixth filing? Fifth filing. That's the southwest corner of the subdivision. It's primarily commercial. There's some mixed use areas with some
And
housing.
Keep me honest here. So would the town ever be able to leverage the approval of a phase by something like the commitments of the pool
Yeah.
to the rest of the neighborhood? I mean, maybe it's just so disconnected.
I think it would be a tough one in that I think within the context, you really should evaluate that filing in the context of the code. And it meeting our current code requirements when that filing is submitted.
Okay.
And we don't have a requirement that I think we could impose on them to somehow go back and buy or operate that pool. And that fifth filing will have nothing to do with the Metro District other than
Yep.
it may be, it's included within the district boundaries, I believe. But their development approvals won't be contingent on any district decisions.
And then a follow-up question. Having been in retail for 45 years and always wanting to respond to my customers, when we get those emails, 99.99% of the time or 100, should we, I don't mean to ignore them, but I mean, should we almost always allow staff to respond to those? I see Will once in a while, he'll respond back, and I just wonder what our role is.
I usually just say thank you for your comments and, just to acknowledge that I saw it.
Okay,
That's what I do.
Any-
Unless
any-
it's something that we're not
any
supposed to
direction or
see,
guidance on that?
then I'll ignore it.
That's a good practice.
Okay.
Because what you don't want to do is create an impression that isn't factual when you may not have all the facts.
Okay.
And also, you wouldn't want to put yourself in a position where later there's some sort of a contentious issue or even litigation, and you've essentially been acting outside the scope of your employment to a
Taking
certain
sides even.
degree,
Yep.
and put yourself in the position of some personal liability perhaps, or or even having to act as a witness in some sort of situation. So, you know, nine times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, your town administrator is gonna have a much better understanding of the facts. And so I think a very good practice is the practice of
Okay.
acknowledging it and saying this is something that is best addressed by our town administrator.
And it's always hard when an email gets sent to the mayor, the board of trustees, town staff, and it's addressed to everyone.
Yep.
I will usually wait to respond until, and Will is really good about this, I think, generally, in saying, hey, you know, thanks, we'll let Administrator Kirk respond. In this case, you know, I know that Will's been busy, and so I don't think she's gotten a response. Her email came in on Saturday, and I didn't respond to it yesterday or today. I will send her a response, let her know we got it. You know, like I said, I've had a lot of these conversations with her and that group already. And then there's some new stuff, you know, the development agreement question, I think was a unique one.
Speaking of the email, that's one thing I did notice is that she emailed the Board of Trustees rather than each of us individually. Is that unfiltered now?
That is available on the town website,
Okay.
so that citizens can send a message to.
So they
the
can
Board of
now send
Trustees.
messages to Board of Trustees?
Yes,
whereas before it
using
was filtered
the
out.
email as opposed to having the
Okay.
copies from all
I was just curious about that because I noticed that was coming through lately.
But again, my emphasis is really less about, you know, the, more about making sure that the person asking that question gets an answer that's based on the best factual information the town has.
Sure.
So, you know, in fairness to that person asking the question, you know, directing that question to the
Answer
town
within your pay grade.
administrator.
And it's tough. I mean, I get it. You know, I get emails, you know, they want to speak to the manager, right? I mean, it's like, I've already talked to Administrator Kirk, I want to talk to the boss. And so they send emails to the entire board, and that's totally appropriate. I get it. It is helpful when, you know, if somebody from the board does respond, it's usually Mayor Carspec, but when that does happen, just to say, hey, you know, we appreciate your feedback, and, you know, we'll let Administrator Kirk respond to you.
Okay, thanks.
I think it's worth noting that, well, two things I've observed about Prairie Star. One is that there's kind of a mass exodus happening in that community. Everyone I know that's lived there is selling with intention to, you know, not being involved in metro districts again and stuff. So I think it's important we field those in the sense that we're thinking about how this is impacting our community and how we respond. I think it's, you know, especially with this situation with the pool, we can't set a precedent of fixing issues that are the responsibility of the neighborhood. And I just wish there was a way we could assist with making sure that everything is managed well. I just wish there was a way we could assist with that, and we haven't figured that out yet. But my solution is always, how do we incentivize neighborhoods that don't have metro districts? Because that's gonna be the tricky thing for Berthoud going forward, is as these things continue to have difficulty. That's just my observation with Prairie Star, is that is the heartburn that people are finding. The second thing I've observed that I think is worth noting for the board is that, you know, when anything goes wrong, it's because the government is evil and we all hate them and we're you know, conniving. And so I feel a personal burden for us to connect with our community as much as possible and educate them on what's happening and how they could be involved in changing things. You know, what can they do? What can we do? And empowering them to understand the process, because I think it's just naivety, right? Like, we didn't understand this role until we're sitting in it and we're like, holy cow, my hands are really tied with some of these things that I wish I could do something different. And so I think this has been really eye-opening that there's a divide happening with Berthoud right now, where just post something on the community page, right? It's like the wolves descend. And I think it's just because there's lack of understanding of what our intention is, what we're doing, and our heart for Berthoud. And so anything the staff can do to encourage people, you know, what the positive that's happening in this room, or the processes that happen and take place, so they know there's not some underlying thing going on. This is just something that didn't exist maybe 10 years ago in Berthoud when I started getting involved, but it's very prevalent now. So I think it is important we're educating the community on our processes and educating them on what they can do about it and how to get involved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one of the things she mentioned in there, and this is where I wonder if the town has any role at all, she said, and I don't know if there's any truth to it, she said, District 1 was carrying all this debt, they merged District 1 and District 2, now District 2, the residents have all this debt that District 1 brought with it. Would we bear any responsibility at all in allowing something like that to happen, or we have no control over it?
I'm not sure about the specifics of their
Do you
situation.
recall, did you read that in there?
I do remember what you're referencing, but I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head. That's a good question. You know, in general, the way that the districts are typically formed, right? District 1 would issue the debt, and all the sub-districts or the other districts in the within would enter into IGAs to pay the district to defease that debt. I'm not really sure about the question of combining districts and merging districts into one another.
We'd wanna know the specifics
I think,
before,
She
yeah.
mentioned it a couple times, so
Yeah.
you might,
wanna look at any specifics before we understand really the factual background before we would.
Yeah, that one's kind of a tricky one.
Anything additional, Administrator Kurt?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
Attorney Smith?
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Sergeant Williamson? All right. Without further ado, I'll close the meeting at 8:45.